Hi, and thanks for joining us for our first webinar, Teach Emotional Regulation and Change Student Behavior. This is the introduction about who we are and the students we serve and the kids we work with. So here's our plan for this first webinar. We want to tell you about our history, the history of Steve and Lori, as we like to say. We live in a changing world of changing students and a lot of support that is needed in schools now. And then what as educators we can do, how do we change the programs for the needs of our students that have really changed, certainly since I've been in education the last 20 years. So this is who we are. We started a program called the Connections Model about 10 years ago. I'm Lori Jackson. I am an educational psychologist for about 20 years, and my colleague, who you won't hear from today, but you will in the future, is Steve Peck, and he is a severe special needs educator, also in the field for about 20 years. Steve and I started working together a while ago, and we were given a task. When we first started working together, I was a school psychologist, Steve was a special educator, and we were sort of brought together to support this group of students in our school who, no matter what we did and how we supported them and the supports that we gave them, we weren't seeing any kind of improvement in their behavior or how they were able to sort of manage the day regardless of their academics. So these were kids who all had above average cognitive abilities. Some of them were diagnosed with disabilities on the spectrum, ADHD, some had some emotional issues, some anxiety, depression. Some didn't have any diagnoses at all. And we at the time were charged with putting together a support structure for them so that they could remain in our school, because if we had to send all of them out, the budget was just going to go completely haywire. Anyone who works with students like these students knows the amount of support and the financial cost of this. So our history was this. Here are these kids, figure out what's going on with them, and then how to make progress working with them. So that was what we did. Here's sort of where it all stemmed from for us. This slide always gets me. It's hard to learn when you're focused on how you feel. Do you know you're focused on how you feel? Are you sure that you even can put into words what's going on inside of you? But what's clear is that the emotion is taking over, and it's making education, the process of education, complicated. So we think about this whole idea of emotions, of emotional intelligence. It's an area that education has talked about for so many years. But really what it is that it involves the ability to understand and manage your emotions. Well, that's great. Can you understand your emotions and can you manage them is a key piece here. And I think what we are seeing and what we have seen since our work started is that the critical element to so many of the kids that we all support is that their emotions are interfering with their ability to use their strong cognitive skills or to use their cognitive skills at all. So what we came forward with so many years ago now was that the crux, the underlying issue, the significant issues that these students were dealing with was their emotions. And they display behavior issues because they can't identify, understand, and manage their emotions. And so anything else that we're asking them to do during their school day, after their school day, before their school day, but that whole range of time is filtered through their ability, and if they can, manage their emotions. So in our introduction, when I was talking about what we are going to look at, what has changed since in the 20 years that I've been a school psychologist and educational psychologist, working with students, working with families and parents, working with teachers? My work when I first started as a school psychologist was so different. It really was working with the academic issues and helping kids overcome their academic disabilities and do well in school. And I also used to run these really great groups in my office. You know, the ones where you invite the kids in during lunch and they play a game and everybody makes some new friends and then they go back out and everything is great. That all changed maybe 10, 12 years ago because our students have really changed. And so my job as a psychologist, and of course I know that everybody out there who's listening to this sees it as educators. So what's happened? So we have sort of toxic, all over the place stress with so many kids, right? Our lives are so much more hectic and kids are experiencing stress in ways that maybe they never have before. Our families, our schools, our communities are experiencing stress. And so obviously stress has a significant role in how people function and what it does to their emotions. Second thing I think has changed for kids, certainly has changed for adults, is social media and the phones and Facebook and Snapchat and always being connected and having that piece of stress, but also all of the associated pieces that come with social media. We have a rise in kids who are requiring support, special needs students, and so we'll look at the rise in this population in particular and how that really has given rise to some of the behavior issues, but also we'll look at it through the lens of emotional regulation. And trauma in kids is an area that, 15, 20 years ago, elementary schools in the suburbs really weren't seeing in quite the same way as we're seeing them now. Certainly other aspects of our society were, but it wasn't as prevalent. And I think that that has significantly changed how we work with our students. So here's what I would put out there for everybody. We have a growing population of kids. This is sort of the way we frame them. They're cognitively able, but they're behaviorally unmanageable. And when I say that, and if you could see me and if I could see you in this presentation, you'd be nodding your head because that's what we see. Yeah, these are kids who can do the work. These are kids who, if we put them in the right framework and their mind and they're in the right frame of mind at the time, they can do amazing work. These are the kids that you say in your team meetings all the time, one day he's great and he does amazing work, and then the next day I get nothing out of him. These are our students in part that we're talking about with anxiety and trauma and social issues and disabilities and this range of students that we're speaking of. What we know about kids with behavior issues, and I call it the dirty little secret of education, unfortunately, is that I don't think we're educating them. Because these statistics should just totally startle you. 62% of teachers report that behavior issues interfere with their ability to teach. Again, if we could see each other right now, you would be nodding because, of course, I've experienced it myself. If Steve were here, he'd be like, oh yes, I have totally experienced it. You have a whole plan for your day, and then you have a few kids who are having some difficulties, and there's no way you're going to get through everything that you need to get through because your job, of course, is to support the kids who need you. Here's another statistic that I know is going to floor you, and that is 50% of students have mental health issues that stem from deficits in their ability to regulate their emotions. That's half of our kids. Half. 2/3 of our kids say that they have had, or we know, have had a traumatic event by age 16. 2/3 of our kids. So we have a significant population of kids who have a lot of things going on. And what we're doing right now in our schools, the way we're addressing it, despite our excellent intentions are really not addressing this problem that we have. So I'll just throw out some more statistics for you because people like them. This is a statistic that, of course, we hear about all the time. We know it well. Autism prevalence since 2000, we know the number 1 in 68. We've heard it. Some places it's higher than that, but that's enormous, and look at the rise. The fastest growing population within the autism population that's growing are the kids who are above average intelligence. So these are the kids that we're starting to see in our classrooms and that need our support. And that's why this increase is even greater, because we have more kids who fit sort of within the diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, who are cognitively able, who are in our classrooms. This is a number that also, we talked about it, it's 50% of kids meet the criteria for a mental health disorder adolescence. So all of these are playing out when we're asking kids to do work, because you just can't separate these pieces out for kids. And then we have the impact of trauma. Exposure to chronic, prolonged experiences alter the brain and have significant long-term effects. This is so significant as we work with kids, as we know that there are situations we experience throughout our lifetime, throughout our communities, that have traumatic impacts and effects on our kids. And it's something that we need to be aware of. Natural disasters that we all experience, unfortunately, in our communities have an impact and have traumatic impact on certain kids. So it's an important situation to be aware as a teacher. So we have spent a tremendous amount of time trying to understand why all of these kids present in similar ways. And again, if we were talking about this together, I would say to you, think about the amount of time that you as teachers spend in team meetings talking about certain kids. And now think about sort of the overlap that these kids have. One of the things that started us on this whole journey for emotional regulation and learning more about emotional regulation and its impact on kids and their learning is that these kids would have a similar history and also a similar presentation when you really boiled it all down. And what did we see in them? It was they were dysregulated. Their emotions either got the better of them. Once they were dysregulated, once something bothered them, it bothered them for a really long time. They just couldn't move on. People call that perseveration with kids who are on the spectrum, but we saw it in all of our kids. We saw difficulties getting past things, but then we also saw sort of this way of sometimes things would bother them and we wouldn't even know what it was until it exploded. So this whole concept of emotional dysregulation, these core features of all of these disabilities, we hypothesized at the time, this is being driven from their emotions. And in fact, this is true. So where did this all boil down for us? It came down to we need to teach kids how to regulate their emotions. And why? Because we want every kid to be their own emotional manager. And for us, that means taking charge of their own behavior, of their own learning. So that's a powerful way of looking at kids' behavior, as opposed to from the outside, us trying to manage and be the managers. As teachers, as educators, we have so many things that are on our plates. We want to give kids the tools to regulate their emotions, just like we give them the tools to learn math or reading or spelling or any of the other things that we do as teachers. The amazing, powerful thing is we are able to teach kids how to be their own emotional managers, and we can give them a lifetime of being available for learning as a result. Here's what it boils down to. You need to be able to regulate your emotions so you have the ability to pay attention so your mind is ready for learning. We call it being ready to learn. When kids can identify, understand, and manage their emotions, they are available for learning. They are ready to learn. So This was step one in our journey. Hopefully you have an idea of where we came from and how we got involved in this process, this very exciting journey that we love so much. What we really want to impart and where we're headed in the future is that every student is going to benefit from learning the skills to manage their emotions, and that will make them ready for learn. This is an absolute game changer. We have seen it. It's amazing what can happen for kids when you just give them the right tools. Not the behavior management tools, but the tools to become their own emotional managers. And so what's next up? Stay tuned. Part 2 is learning about the science and the research behind Kid Connect and the Ready to Learn program, so that you have an idea of why we are sure that emotional regulation is the key to kids being their own emotional managers. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you in webinar number 2. Very important, if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out and say, Lori, I don't get what you said because it doesn't make sense to me, or explain it to me again, or hey, this sounds like a kid can I bounce this idea off you? There are our emails, use them, and thanks for joining us.